Well, Canada's business community is also watching closely this morning who will be ministers in Prime Minister Mark Carney's new cabinet. From decreasing interprovincial trade barriers to increasing investments in infrastructure, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is calling for cabinet to act quickly to improve the environment for businesses in this country. For more on what that community is looking for, we're joined this morning from Ottawa by Matthew Holmes, Executive Vice President and Chief of Public Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Great to have you with us this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Your organization has pointed out that former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's approach to the business community needs was what you described as too timid. What specific policies are you talking about, and what are you looking for with this new leader and new cabinet?
Well, I think it's important to sort of stand back and recognize that there hasn't really been a parliament sitting in Canada for close to 6 months by the time we have the speech from the throne and get started again. So there's a lot of business just in the typical kind of mechanics of government in Canada that needs to be done, and it's been on pause. But before that time, we also had a government that was getting stuck in a lot of procedural kind of games and had a very toxic environment with the different parties across the aisle. And it wasn't the government's fault. It wasn't the opposition's fault. It just wasn't a well-functioning parliament. And so we also had a government that seemed to be kind of lagging or listing in terms of what its plan was. All of that has changed dramatically since we hit January 2025. And the new U.S. administration came into power. And I think everybody here in Canada is galvanized and understands the order of business today is business. The Parliament of Canada needs to make itself a parliament for business to deal with the economy, to deal with our trade war with the United States, our global trade relationship with other countries, and what's the Canadian competitiveness for our business community? Can we get big things done in this country? Can we protect our workers? Can we create the jobs that our communities need?
Well, and it's really trifold, right? Because we're looking across the ocean, we're looking south of the border, and we're looking within our own borders as well. Some of the people who are expected to make Prime Minister Carney's front bench have extensive experience in the business world. Some of those include former Goldman Sachs Canada CEO Tom Hodgson and former Quebec Finance Minister Carlos Letao. So what signal would having voices like those in cabinet send to the business community? And as you say, the order of business is business.
Yeah. Well, no, I think Prime Minister Carney has a pretty good bench to pick from, actually, and he doesn't really owe too many favors. I think he really campaigned on his vision and him coming in as a new approach and a new vision for government and a steady hand on the economy. So a lot of the other candidates who ran and were successful have some great business experience. I'm thinking of Jill McKnight from Delta, BC. She comes from the Delta Chamber of Commerce, so of course we love her. But she's worked on the ground with local businesses. You have Gregor Robertson too, the former mayor of Vancouver, an entrepreneur in his own right. As you mentioned, Carlos Letao, the former finance minister for Quebec, Corey Hogan from Calgary, who's worked in the energy sector for many years. So there's a pretty good bench here to pick from. And what we are looking for is a smaller cabinet. So happy to hear some of that being floated this morning. One that can be focused and with some experience, both international experience and business experience, will really inform how this government needs to move quickly. We need to move faster in Canada. We need to ensure that the regulatory burden on business is right-sized, and that the jurisdictions are also working well together. So you mentioned internal trade. Yeah. That's an important one, but it's also about how much federal regulation is layered on provincial regulation is layered on municipal regulation. And you just need to look at the housing sector to understand how 3 levels of regulation make it really difficult for business to get things built. Well,
to get anything done. Your group, in fact, is calling for action from Ottawa on 3 major priorities for businesses, and I want to lay them out for everybody. They are making free internal trade a reality, reducing taxes, and cutting red tape for businesses, a bit of what you were just talking about, making long-term investments for infrastructure. So how do you want Carney's cabinet to deliver on those issues? And more importantly, I guess, who would you like to see there to reassure you that these things are going to get done?
Well, I won't get into sort of, picking favorites here. I think, again, there's a pretty strong bench to pick from, both in terms of people who have been in cabinet before and have that experience. And so, as I mentioned, also a number of new faces that could bring relevant private sector experience to the table, and I think really inform the discussion. In terms of the 3 priorities, internal trade, the Prime Minister made that a commitment by Canada Day. So we expect to see some big moves there. And that, again, that's a call to all governments. It's not just the federal government. The provincial governments also need to respond. The territorial governments, of course, as well. And so that is a kind of full court press that needs to happen. And we've seen some very promising work out of Nova Scotia and Ontario. On infrastructure, this one is critical. Like, if we want to trade with ourselves or we want to trade with other countries around the world, we need to build east to west. And that means ports, it means bridges, it means rails. We need to diversify the critical infrastructure that allows us to move people and goods across this country, because that's what an economy is built upon. That also creates a lot of jobs in the meantime. So we can start picking some projects, big nation building projects, and let's get them started.
Matthew Holmes, Executive Vice President and Chief of Public Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Great to have you with us. We will be thinking of your words as we are watching to see who's named in cabinet today. If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.